We have a very interesting development right now in German politics. Sahra Wagenknecht, the former parliamentary leader of Die Linke and one of the party's most important figures, has defected, has left the party, and created her own independent grouping. Now, this is not an official political party yet. It is expected to be officially founded sometime in January, but it is known as the BSV, the Alliance Sahra Wagenknecht, and it is basically a party that has some of the traditional values of Die Linke that split away after a lot of infighting between her and some of the other party leaders. Now, there was rumors that this would happen for a long time, years going back even, because of the divide between Wagenknecht and the rest of her party, but she has finally done it, and she has actually brought 10 Bundestagsabgeordnete, members of the German Bundestag, including her, to this new party from the 39 current members of Die Linke in the Bundestag. Now, this is an interesting development, and this will have a huge impact on not only Die Linke, but the other parties in Germany. And I want to cover the overall background of Wagenknecht as an individual, as a politician, and overlook at the difference between her new party and the traditional Die Linke that has existed in Germany in some form or another since the end of the Cold War and since German reunification. The current iteration of Die Linke is actually two separate political parties that were merged together in 2007. The first of these was the PDS, or Party of Democratic Socialism, which was the successor to the East German Communist Party, the SED. So what happened basically was, after the end of the Cold War in 1990, after the fall of communism in East Germany, the more moderate and younger generation of the SED rebranded and reformed the party into the PDS, which was a democratic socialist left-wing populist party that was seen as the successor to the SED, but more moderate and adaptable to a democratic and unified German environment. They competed in East German state elections, a lot of times being even on the same level as the SPD in the CDU, and in the federal elections in the Bundestag, they were able to constantly win seats with strong support, especially in East Berlin. Gregor Gysi is their most notable member. He was elected directly in his district in East Berlin, and also was before elected to the Volkskammer for a brief time. The East German parliament was democratically elected before reunification was carried out. The second part is the WASG, the Labor and Social Justice Electoral Alternative. This was a political alliance of disaffected leftists, mainly in West Germany, who were dissatisfied with the political work of Gerhard Schröder, the chancellor from the SPD at the time. The SPD Green government, of course, was a center-left government, but had over the time become more neoliberal, and a lot of these more left-wing voters had seen it as too much of a shift to the right and were very dissatisfied, and created this electoral alternative to compete with the SPD. Early on, Oskar Lafontaine, a high-ranking member of the SPD who had left the Gerhard Schröder government for these similar reasons, joined the party and became one of its main candidates. In 2007, Oskar Lafontaine, as leader of the WASG, and Gregor Gysi as PDS, merged their parties together to create Die Linke, which would compete in the further elections onwards. The party represented a broad, German-wide political alliance of left-wing socialist, communist, democratic socialists, and more radical social democrats, which competed both in strongholds in the east, which had been the heartland of the PDS, and also in urban centers in Western Germany, with working class voters that were dissatisfied with the SPD. Initially, the party was very successful. In the 2009 federal election, it won 11.9% of the vote, its best showing ever. In Eastern Germany, it had won 28.5%, coming second place just behind the CDU. And in the states of Brandenburg and Saxony-Anhalt, it was the largest party. Even in West Germany, where it hadn't done traditionally as well, it was able to break through, with industrial and working class voters winning 8.3% of the vote. The party also was able to win support in state elections around the same time. However, despite these successes, within a few years, the divide in the party was clear. By 2012, there was major infighting in the party between the two factions. The East German wing was considered to be more moderate, while the West German wing was considered to be more radical, and both groups often clashed on ideological grounds. Sahra Wagenknecht, despite being from the East, lives and is politically active in the West, and is attributed to the more radical wing of the party. These divisions would continue to grow. In 2014, Sahra Wagenknecht married Oskar Lafontaine, also from the West German wing. The two represent the political leadership of this grouping in the party. The personal relationship between Oskar Lafontaine and Gregor Gysi became more and more strained, as the party continued to be divided. The infighting only grew, and by 2019, the party suffered major losses in its East German heartland at state elections to the AfD. At the 2021 federal election, the party suffered a historic defeat, falling below the 5% threshold and only entering the Bundestag by winning 3 direct mandates in East Berlin and Leipzig. In March 2022, Oskar Lafontaine left the party, saying it was no longer a viable political alternative. Wagenknecht's departure marks the completion of this phase in the split of the party. She is no doubt a controversial figure, but has a strong base of support amongst the West German state branches of the party, while at the same time being a native of East Germany and having strong support amongst the voters there. Early on in her political career, she became known for her open support of communism, at times often defending the actions of the East German and Soviet governments. For this reason, many of her colleagues always distanced themselves from her. Nonetheless, she was an important figure in the party, oftentimes taking part in debates and talk shows. Wagenknecht's charismatic and strong political profile have led her to becoming one of the most notable politicians in Germany. One of the main reasons Wagenknecht decided to leave is that she claimed Die Linke was too focused on identity politics rather than actually helping working people. She proposes a more classical, traditional style of working-class socialism rather than the modern, progressive, liberal version seen in many Western countries today. She's also very supportive and friendly towards Eastern countries such as Russia and China. And while this is the case for Die Linke itself, Wagenknecht is much more willing to be open about it and go a lot further than any of her colleagues were. She's also been very critical of the Greens and SPD for not truly being leftist enough, and has at times opposed working with them when more moderate members of her party supported going into coalitions. The effect this new party will have on German politics is not yet completely clear. However, there is some polling to suggest what might occur. I want to take a brief look at the federal polling as well as a look at her home state of Thuringia. The party won't have a chance to compete in major elections until the European parliamentary elections in June of next year, and the East German state elections the following September. Until then, it will only be represented by defections, which as of now have not been too major. The most notable being Amira Mohammed Ali, one of Die Linke's parliamentary faction leaders, and Klaus Ernst, former chairman of the WASG. Along with the 10 members in the Bundestag, there have been a member of the Berlin and Hamburg state legislature from Die Linke that have joined. More defections are possible in the future, but how many is unknown. The current party leaders, Janine Wissler and Martin Schwideran, have criticized harshly this move, and even much of the old guard of the party has attacked Wagenknecht as well. In the current polling for the federal election, the new party is at 12 to 14%, taking a large amount of votes away from the AfD, but also taking some support away from every party. It is also taking enough support away from Die Linke to push them further below the 5% threshold, almost ensuring the party will lose representation in the Bundestag. These polls put the BSW in 4th place, slightly ahead of the Greens, but behind the CDU, AfD, and SPD that are in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Her support in East Germany, however, is much stronger. There have only been a few polls with the party for these state elections. It is not sure yet whether or not they will actually run. The party is at 21% in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and 20% in Brandenburg. In Thuringia, they are the highest at 25%. Looking at the polls for Thuringia, we see the huge impact her party has on the election. The AfD is currently polling as the largest party at 32%. Die Linke, the party of incumbent Governor Bodo Ramelow, is at 2nd place with 22%, followed by the CDU at 20%. We see when Sahra Wagenknecht's party is added to the list, all of these parties suffer losses. Both the CDU and Die Linke fall 4 points, landing below 20%. And the AfD suffers a 10-point loss compared to what they're at now. Many of these voters are former left-wing voters who have been supporting the AfD but are also willing to support Wagenknecht. Also, being at 25%, her party is also the largest in the state, beating the AfD by 3 points. This is only one poll, and we are still a ways away from the election, so the effect that her party will have is still not completely certain. However, if these polls are any indication of what might happen, this will have a huge impact on East German politics and German politics in general forever.